7 years' captivity, Colleen escaped from the clutches of her abductor. He was found guilty of kidnapping and sentenced to 100 years.
Hello, I'm Black Online. If this is your first time here, I talk about some real-life stories and discuss interesting topics. So if you like these kinds of videos, don't forget to click subscribe under the video and activate the notifications bell. Let's start. So I gave you different options. Now let's dive into today's story. In 1977, in Eugene City, USA, a 20-year-old girl received a call from a friend inviting her to her birthday party and insisting that she attend. The girl enthusiastically accepted the invitation and headed to her friend's house, and that was the last time she saw the sun for many years to follow. In 1984, a hotel employee received some news from a relative that made her collapse and cry hysterically. Today's story is a horrifying one in all its aspects, and one of the most horrific cases you'll ever hear about. It was described as unparalleled in FBI history. You'd feel anxious just imagining the circumstances the victim had to endure, and with each passing minute, it'll make you wish that she would stay alive. What was that 20-year-old girl's story? Who was that employee? What happened during those years? Let's start right from the beginning. In 1973, a guy named Cameron Hooker graduated high school, then worked in a wood factory when he was only 19. Then he met Janice, his dream girl who was 15 at the time. Janice lived with her devout family who didn't allow her to go out with anybody. She had few friends, but when the family met Cameron, they liked him. They admired the fact that, at the age of 19, he was working hard to establish himself in addition to his prestigious appearance. So they allowed their daughter to go out with him and get to know him. Janice told Cameron about her abusive family, how they didn't care for her, and how she lost her self-esteem because of that. Cameron was very understanding, expressing his love and care for her, always bringing her flowers and gifts and demonstrating a love she had never known before. Cameron's gestures seemed enormous in light of her parents' lack of concern for her. Cameron promised Janice that he'll keep caring for her on one condition, that she joins him in some of his hobbies. How simple. Janice agreed without hesitation because she thought she wouldn't find that level of care and attention anywhere else. After dating for about 2 or 3 years, Cameron decided to propose to Janice, and her parents agreed straight away. 2 years after their marriage, they had a baby girl. Every day Cameron would go to his work until late at night, bringing with him some groceries and such. On the 19th of May 1977, the couple were driving around, running some errands, and they drove past a girl waving at them to stop. Cameron stopped the car, and the girl asked them if they could give her a ride, and she was staring into Cameron's eyes, thinking to herself, a man whose clothes indicate that he'd just finished work. Driving with his wife and baby girl, they seemed like good people. The couple agreed to take her with them in the car, and nobody knew what was going to happen next. But before we find out what happened, let's get to know that girl a little better. Colleen Stan, a 20-year-old girl who had a normal childhood, living with her parents and 2 sisters, but later on, her parents separated, and Colleen got married while still young, but for an unknown reason. That marriage didn't last long. After that, Colleen decided to start a new life, and she relocated to Eugene with a group of friends, which was about 400 miles away from California. On May 19th, Colleen received a phone call from a friend inviting her to her birthday party in California and insisting that she attend. Colleen apologized and promised to make amends later. But in fact, Colleen was planning to surprise her by showing up. Colleen got everything ready in the morning and headed to her friend's house. Colleen was careful not to ride with any stranger. She ignored many trucks and guys. She would look into people's eyes while talking to them to try to find out if they were good or not. Sometimes a person's eyes can reveal a lot about him, whether he's good or bad. Colleen rejected 2 cars that stopped for her until she stopped those couple, Cameron and Janice. Colleen saw them as her best option and felt safe with them, so she asked them to give her a ride and got into their car. And after that day, Colleen never returned home. Her friends waited until the next day, assuming she wanted to continue partying, or perhaps she wanted to spend the night with a friend. Keep in mind we're talking about the 70s, when phones weren't a thing yet, and there was no quick way to contact her. A few days passed, and Colleen's friends didn't hear anything from her, so they decided to call her father and tell him that Colleen was missing. The father informed the police immediately, and they contacted the friend, who claimed that Colleen didn't come in the first place, and that she didn't even see her. Then they began looking for her everywhere. You're probably wondering what happened to Colleen that day. I need you to prepare yourselves, because I don't think you're ready for what you're about to hear, the awful things you're about to hear. After Colleen joined the couple on their ride, they stopped at a gas station. Colleen got out to go to the bathroom, and while in there she recalled Cameron's stares in the mirror, which were very disturbing. Her inner voice was telling her to run away, the inner voice we all hear sometimes and know as the gut feeling. She ignored it and thought, these people are a family with a baby, nothing scary, but I want you all to pay attention. This inner voice you hear is never wrong. If you ever felt uncomfortable with something, stop it immediately. Anyway, Colleen decided to go back and ride with them, but she was surprised by a wooden box on the seat beside her that was not there before. She had a bad feeling about that box, but she ignored it too and said to herself, it's just a box. Why would I be scared? The couple told Colleen that they wanted to check an ice cave nearby, and they asked her if it was okay to visit it before dropping her. Colleen had no choice but to agree. They drove down a dirt road, and Colleen started to feel more scared. Then the car stopped in the middle of an open area. Colleen looked around, but she didn't see any cave. They all got out of the car, including Colleen. Then suddenly, Cameron attacked Colleen with a knife from behind and whispered to her, "You'll do everything I tell you to do. Everything." He blindfolded her and put her head inside the box in the back seat and closed it. The box was slightly opened around the neck. What Colleen didn't know about that box, when she had a bad feeling about it, that it was a torture device and she would be tortured in it. It wasn't just an ordinary box. The box was soundproofed with carpets. It only allowed a small amount of air in and weighed nearly 9 kilograms. Cameron forced Colleen to stay in the back seat until they arrived home, and when they did, he led Colleen to the basement. Of course, we've all heard of those dark basements where terrible things happen. We heard many horrifying stories about torture, and other heinous things happened in basements. Colleen entered the basement and saw torture devices all around the place. At first she had no idea what those wooden and metal tools were, but she knew that she had fallen into the hands of a complete lunatic. At the beginning, we thought Cameron was a loving father who worked hard to take care of his family, but in reality, he was the complete opposite. After graduating, Cameron started having twisted, evil thoughts about slavery all the time. He loved to enslave people, especially women. He even thought about enslaving and torturing a group of women. He also purchased many magazines that talked about those stuff magazines for mentally ill people like him, psychopaths. When he first met Janice, his wife, he saw her as an easy target due to her vulnerability and weak personality, so he took advantage of that. and he promised to love and care for her forever on one condition: to participate with him in his hobbies, which were in fact carrying out his twisted, devilish actions on her. Janice was in fact his first victim. She was tortured in the woods on their first date, but she agreed to stay with him because after that he cared for her and treated her differently. How insane. A year after their marriage, Janice got tired of his sadistic and violent personality and told him that she wanted to have children and he should stop torturing her. Cameron agreed on one condition: finding another victim, to torture them instead, because he was a psycho, insane, obsessed retard. He called the victim a slave. He wanted a slave to carry out his sadistic thoughts on her. So Janice agreed. She was a bastard too. So don't sympathize with her, because anyone who accepts such things on herself and then agrees to have other women kidnapped and subjected to the same horrific experiences is a total bastard. Janice agreed on one condition: that he doesn't not rape her, torture, beat, and abuse her in any way he wanted, but not rape her. How infuriating. Damn you both. Then Cameron spent a lot of time in the basement, making devices and inventing new forms of torture. He built a torture table and a huge wooden coffin and prepared the place for his next victim. He became so insane that he tried those devices on Janice while she was pregnant to make sure that everything was working fine. It took him months to prepare that place. After the birth of their first daughter, who was unfortunate to live with those two psychopaths, they went out to look for their victim. Unfortunately, Colleen was waiting for them, and she became their victim. After Colleen entered the basement, her first torture stage began when Cameron hung her from her wrists, and since it was the first stage, Colleen resisted, screamed, and tried to break free, but Cameron started torturing her to stop screaming, and he threatened to cut her vocal cords if she didn't stop screaming. Then she would scream without a voice, claiming that he had done it before. "You son of a dog, pig, donkey. You choose or select all. I've read the entire story and know what's going to happen, so I'm furious with that person. So you'll see this reaction and consider it normal, because I'm sure you're feeling the same, or more." Cameron then left her and came back with the heavy box to be put overhead, and he put her head inside of it and locked it. But that wasn't enough for him. He also got a larger box, the coffin, and put Colleen inside before locking it. Colleen stayed inside the box until the next day. I don't think I need to tell you how hot it was and how difficult it was to breathe. Okay, you locked her in the basement, but why did you suffocate her inside the coffin? You could just let her free in the basement, lock the basement and leave her there. She could sleep the way she wanted. Why a box within a box? Because the torture was the primary reason for the kidnapping. He had some ideas he wanted to carry out, and simply locking her in the basement wouldn't be enough. All I can say is that God, please grant me patience with this story. What's more frustrating is that Colleen would have to live inside that box. From then on, Cameron would leave for work every day, and when he returned, he would torture Colleen in horrifying ways that I won't go into. I'll leave it up to you to imagine. Colleen was locked inside the box for 22 to 23 hours a day, with only an hour or two to get out, and she had a plastic box as a potty. He only let her out to eat bits of their leftovers or to torture her. Unfortunately, and since Cameron was good with manual work, he made a torture device, which was used in the Middle Ages, in which the victim's hands and legs were tied to four corners, then stretched. Cameron had some sense of creativity, so he decided to add something new. He wrapped Colleen's body with electrical wires and shocked her while stretching her. You can imagine God Grant me the patience to refrain from saying vile things because I'm infuriated and I still have to edit. After a month of being tortured on a daily basis, Colleen lost 10 kilograms. By the way, Colleen was being tortured blindfolded, meaning she spent that entire time in darkness and couldn't expect what would happen next and whether he'd slap her, drag her by the neck, or electrify her. It's a bad feeling to not know what's going to happen to you. After 4 consecutive months of that routine, he allowed her to take a shower. Colleen was wondering the entire time what was her fault or what did she do to deserve such spiteful torture. But the poor girl didn't realize that when a psychopath tortures someone, he doesn't care if he knew them or not. All he cares about is exploiting the victim to satisfy his perverted fantasies. That situation continued another 4 months. So 8 months in total. Cameron then allowed Colleen to get out for more than just 2 or 3 hours, not outside, of course, but inside the house to clean and do some housework. He had to take her blindfold off so she could see during that short time. Her senses were all impaired because, as I said, she spent 8 months blindfolded and she couldn't hear or move properly because she had been motionless inside the box for so long. But the worst thing was the psychological torture she endured. In January 1978, Cameron revealed something dangerous to Colleen. He told her that he was a member of a secret organization called the Company. It consisted of high-ranking and rich people such as judges and police officers who secretly enslaved women through contracts in the USA. Additionally, the company used an advanced surveillance technology to monitor those women in case they tried to escape or call the police. First, the cops won't help them because they were part of that organization. Second, the women would be killed alongside their family and all their friends. For that reason, it remained a secret organization because any victim who tried to escape would be killed before revealing anything. Cameron brought out the slavery contract and ordered Colleen to sign it. His secret name within the company was Michael Bowers, and Colleen's was only K. The contract stated that Michael, Cameron, had full control over K, Colleen her life, her belongings, and that she officially became his slave. Colleen had no choice but to sign, giving in to her painful destiny. Janice also signed the contract as a witness. After that, he started raping Colleen, and things was getting worse by the day. Years later, Colleen began accepting her fate as slave. To that psycho, she even gave up the idea of escaping because she knew the company was watching her, and she was worried about her family and friends. She thought to herself, her life had already been ruined, so why would she ruin the lives of her family and friends as well? They shouldn't be killed because of her. One day, Cameron decided to move with them and live in a caravan. The reason was unclear, but the relocation made things worse. A caravan wouldn't fit 3 people with a baby. Cameron decided to put Colleen inside the box under the bed. Just imagine how uncomfortable it was. What was even more shocking was that he kept torturing her in the same ways. During that time, Janice gave birth to their second baby on the bed Colleen was trapped under. During those years, Colleen's family was still thinking of her, but out of desperation, they convinced themselves that she was either murdered or she joined some religious cult. They had no idea what she was actually going through. 3 years passed, and Colleen became more submissive and accepting of her reality. Cameron even let her out of the coffin, and he taught her that whenever he said attention, she must run and stand where he tortured her and say, "Yes, sir." He also made her work in the backyard, and the neighbors met her and thought she was part of the family. Cameron's ego and arrogance had grown to the point where he was certain Colleen would never say anything, and that he had total control over her, and she would never tell anyone because the company would protect him and kill her. Can you grasp the mental instability? A complete scumbag. He once let her walk around the block alone, confident that she wouldn't run away, and indeed she walked around, then came back to him. Cameron was certain at that point that he had completely brainwashed her. Even if he took her to her parents' home, she would come back to him like a dog. Don't get me wrong. She was undoubtedly a poor girl, but I mean that was how he saw her. One day, Cameron decided to give Colleen a gift, which was allowing her to call her parents and talk to them. Wait until you hear what happened next, you won't believe it. Poor Colleen was very happy and really grateful. Colleen called her sister and told her who she was. The sister was shocked and began asking her how she was and if she was all right. She inquired as to where she had disappeared, what had happened, and where she had been all these years. Colleen replied, "I'm fine. Everything is fine." And she didn't tell her anything about Cameron. Colleen's family was convinced then that she had joined some cult and didn't say anything. And they told her, "You made a decision, and we don't know whether it was right or wrong. But please stay in touch with us. We are your family, and we wanted to talk to you. But what you did was wrong, to disappear all those years, then call us out of a sudden. You could have called us earlier, but you decided to run away suddenly." They were blaming her, but the truth was that she couldn't say anything. Cameron was very proud of Colleen and his achievement. He made her a slave of his own, controlling her however he wanted. He used to have to lock her up to keep her from escaping, but then he could let her walk around the block and talk to her parents and remaining under his command. Screw you, what a bastard. Imagine that he then decided to give her another gift. The first one was the phone call, but the second gift was even bigger and better. He decided to let her visit her parents. Imagine how confident he was that he had full control over her. Unfortunately, he was right to feel that way. Colleen visited her family with Cameron and introduced him as her fiancé, Mike, and told them that they were getting married soon. Mike, the lovely guy, would even allow Colleen to sleep at her parents for one day. Then he'll come back to pick her up, but unfortunately, he couldn't stay because he was busy. Colleen's family were shocked because Colleen appeared skinny, scrawny, and clearly exhausted, and they wondered where had she been all those years. Colleen was aware that the company was watching her, and she was not answering any of their questions. She only pretended to be okay, and that everything was fine, but her appearance suggested otherwise. Colleen's family decided not to push her for answers, so she would keep visiting them. Cameron left her there and came back the next day to take her. The photo you're seeing now was taken by her parents, and it depicts them as two happy lovers. Looking at this photo while knowing exactly what happened to this girl is very aggravating and heartbreaking and can't be forgotten. Eventually, Colleen didn't reveal anything about him to her family. She stayed with them for an entire day and couldn't say anything. See how much this makes your blood boil. She was with her parents and could have informed the police. She could have taken many actions, but she did nothing. She completely accepted her life as a slave, and she couldn't say anything unless her master allowed her to, telling her when and what to say, and that was what she did. Colleen was most concerned about the contract she signed because she didn't want her family or friends to be killed. After that visit, Cameron figured that he might have been too nice to her. So after he began allowing her to leave for some time, he reverted to imprisoning her inside the box, 22 to 23 hours a day, and he started torturing her even more than before. That situation lasted 3 years, until 1983, when he allowed her to leave again. The bastard had complete control over her. He ruined her life. After allowing her to leave again, to look after the children, don't forget that she was his slave, Colleen was surprised to discover that the children had grown up. The baby daughters were all grown up, so she began to wonder, how long have I been imprisoned? How many years have passed? she lost her sense of time. The question now is, what about those two little girls in that place? One of them was about 6 years old. Were they aware of what was going on around them? In that small caravan where those horrible things took place, how did they feel? They must have heard or seen something that will haunt them for the rest of their lives. 7 years later, Cameron ordered Colleen to work as a cleaning lady in a hotel. Since she was his slave, she had to work and make him money. He wanted to start profiting from her because he got bored of just torturing her, so he wanted to use her to make money. He didn't want to let her stay for free, so he ordered her to work and make money for him, as if she was living in luxury in that caravan. Set her free, for God's sake, divorce her. Just let her go and live her life. May God damn you. That's all we can say. Of course, you know what happened next. Colleen worked as a cleaning lady in a hotel, but Colleen was then around people, which was better than the life of torture in the caravan. People started to ask her about her appearance, why so exhausted and scrawny, but Colleen, as usual, didn't say a word. She accepted her fate as a slave forced to face reality, or else the company would kill her, her family, and her friends. Personally, I believe that's not a way to live, and I would have called the cops regardless of what might have happened, because the story he told about that evil company was unbelievable. That they were going to slaughter her and her friends, it was simply implausible. I would have called the cops, and if he killed me, he'd be damned. She was already living like a dead person. No, at the very least. The dead are at rest, and that poor woman was far from it. Her life was not one of humans at all. She accepted that life because she believed she would be killed, alongside her family and friends, so she accepted her fate. As time went by, the devil within Cameron grew larger and stronger, and he wanted to enslave more women. He was bored with just Colleen after all those years, and he desired a change. He began building a torture cell in his backyard and made Colleen help him. He told her about his plan and how she would train women and teach them how to be obedient and submissive to him, just like her. During this time, Cameron tried to get closer to Colleen, treating her with less cruelty because Colleen was promoted from a slave to a trainer, which necessitated a little more respect and a slight shift in treatment. He allowed her to spend more time with his children in order to get closer to them and play with them, and he told her that he'll consider her his second wife. Another promotion. This story is so infuriating in so many ways that it makes my blood boil, and I'm struggling to keep my cool. But I just can't. The son of... Janice became increasingly jealous of Colleen at the time, and she despised having her around. How late? Her conscience didn't awake until all those years later. That coincided with her committing to going to church and attending sermons. At that point, Janice began recalling everything that had happened to Colleen over the past 7 years, and she felt guilty towards her. Even though Janice was a victim, she was also considered a participant in the crime, because she had the ability to save Colleen from day one. But she didn't do that and chose to be a bastard and not help her. I repeated the word bastard several times in this video because I wanted to use even harsher words, but it won't be appropriate. Janice pondered for a while before deciding to talk to Colleen and help her escape. My guess, and nothing in the story mentions it, is that Janice only helped Colleen escape because Cameron was going to marry Colleen, so Janice felt jealous of Colleen and decided to do that. Because poor Colleen had been imprisoned there for 7 years, tortured and humiliated, and Janice did nothing to help her. But when Cameron decided to marry Colleen, Janice's conscience suddenly awakened and she decided to help her in escaping. The bastard only felt guilty and decided to help Colleen 7 years later. Doesn't make sense. Anyway, on August 9th, 1984, Janice went to see Colleen in the hotel and told her that there was something important she needed to know. She told her that the company wouldn't kill her if she tried to escape because it didn't exist. That's what we all thought. But Colleen couldn't think clearly. While being tortured and subjected to such cruel circumstances, we can't blame her. She blindly believed that. Janice told Colleen the truth. There was no company, and it was implausible that such company could be controlled by police officers and judges, and if she reported them, she would be killed alongside her friends and family. It was just implausible. But as we've said before, we can't blame her. What she endured was far from easy. To be imprisoned inside a coffin with a wooden box over her head for many years, preventing her from seeing anything, that would make her feel lost and confused. Janice went on to tell Colleen that the contract she signed was fake and Cameron wrote it himself, only to keep her from escaping. But the truth was that it was all a lie. Colleen collapsed in shock and began crying hysterically. All those years she believed something that turned out to be a lie. She had multiple opportunities to escape, but she didn't because of the company. The poor woman believed the company was real. How could that poor woman have fallen for it? She had multiple opportunities to escape, but she didn't because of the company, and because she was convinced that she was a slave. But in the end, it all turned out to be a ploy. Colleen then gathered herself and quickly headed to the bus station, where she called her father and told him that she was coming home. The weird thing she did after that, she called Cameron and told him she had run away and would never return to him. At that point, Cameron started crying like a baby, and he begged her to come back, but Colleen hung up the phone, boarded the bus, and returned to her family. Colleen's family was very relieved to see her return. They were worried for her and asked her how she was doing. Despite that, Colleen was still in shock, and she did not tell her family anything. The next morning, Colleen received a call from Janice asking her to not tell the police anything, promising her that they would work together to help Cameron become a better person. I believe that the only way to fix Cameron is by executing him, not the usual execution, but to be tortured in the same ways he tortured Colleen. In these kinds of cases, I don't wish the criminals to be executed because that means they'll die, and that's it. It's the same with a life sentence in prison. It's not enough. He should be tortured in the same way he tortured that poor woman, putting the same box over his head, then putting him inside a coffin and keeping him inside for 23 hours a day, only letting him out for a short time to feed him leftovers and keeping him like that until he dies. Or maybe it's better not to feed him at all, so he would die the way he deserves, and it would be considered execution. Surprisingly, Colleen agreed to collaborate with Janice to try to fix Cameron. Colleen still hadn't told her family anything about what happened, so they wouldn't inform the cops. 3 months have passed and neither the cops nor anyone else knew anything, and Colleen's mouth was still shut. During that time, Janice was committed to attending church sermons, and she decided to confess everything that had happened to Colleen to the priest. The priest went to church expecting to have an ordinary day until he heard that horrifying story from Janice. The priest immediately told Janice that she should inform the cops, and he told her that he was going with her to help her. Eventually, Janice went to the cops. Notice that Colleen wasn't who went to the cops, but Janice Colleen really frustrated me in some parts of the story, but I don't blame her because of the trauma she went through. I believe that if Colleen was evaluated by psychiatrists, they would discover that she was mentally disturbed as a result of the horrific experience she went through. So Janice going to inform the cops was really perplexing, but what was even more shocking was that the cops did not believe Janice. The cops really didn't believe her and told her she was making it all up. A woman imprisoned inside a box under a bed, tortured for 7 years. If that happened to anyone, even for one day, he'd be traumatized for the rest of his life, let alone 7 years. The cops went to the caravan and searched it, and they were surprised to find the torture devices and proof of Janice's story's veracity, such as the box, the coffin, and the weapons. They also found the fake contract that Cameron had forged. They also discovered horrific photos Cameron took of Colleen while torturing her. They then searched the old house and the basement where Colleen stayed in her first few years. Colleen was then summoned to court to testify about everything. The court wanted to make sure Colleen was coerced rather than consenting, because consenting would change the entire case, absolving Cameron. But Colleen's behavior in court was strange. She was calm, only describing what had happened. She didn't look like an oppressed person trying to seek revenge. She also recalled some happy moments she lived during her painful journey. Some suggested that Colleen was suffering from Stockholm Syndrome, a psychological condition in which hostages develop a psychological bond with their captors. Colleen said what affected her the most wasn't the physical torture, but convincing her that the company existed and she had been a slave for all those years. At the trial, Janice disclosed a crucial statement. She told the judge that Colleen wasn't their first victim. Janice confessed that Cameron had also kidnapped a 20-year-old girl named Mary Elizabeth in 1976, a year before kidnapping Colleen. Janice claimed that he kidnapped, raped, tortured, and then shot Mary. She said they buried her in the desert. The cops tried to search for the body but found nothing, but Janice confirmed that she had witnessed the murder and the burial. She even remembered the date. But what about Janice? What was her situation in regard to Colleen's case? The court gave her full immunity, but she had to testify against Cameron. They considered her a victim as well, who was brainwashed and tortured like Colleen, although some people believed that she should have been punished because she was considered a participant in the crime. I personally agree, because if Colleen hadn't seen that woman with her baby, she wouldn't have ridden with them. So Colleen trusted Janice and assumed that she, with her husband and their baby, were just a normal family. So Janice's presence in the car made Colleen trust Cameron and not be afraid from him. Thus she was a participant in the crime and had a main role in it, because Colleen would not have ridden with them if Janice hadn't been in the car. But Janice was acquitted by the judge. She wasn't punished at all. Cameron's attorney claimed that Colleen stayed with him voluntarily because she didn't try to run away, even when she got the chance, so she wanted to be with him. That statement was deemed nonsense by the jury because during the trial, the box was there. Everyone could imagine what happened in it and the horrible circumstances Colleen had endured. No way she wanted that. However, the judge sentenced Cameron to 104 years in prison. Cameron told his lawyer after the sentencing, "I want you to thank the judge for me. I have a library, a gym, and the time to enjoy them. And it's better than living with those two women, Colleen and Janice." Cameron was imprisoned, and then in 2021, and because of the pandemic, several prisoners were rehabilitated to be released. Unfortunately, Cameron was one of them, but Colleen immediately interfered and hired a lawyer and stopped that. However, in 2022, he still has a chance to be released. He'll be tested to see if he's lost his sadistic tendencies and should be released, or if he hasn't and should remain in prison. Janice, on the other hand, changed her identity and moved out of the state, and no one knows anything about her. This story inspired directors to make a film. It's called Girl in the Box. Many people thought the film was untrue to the story, because it didn't accurately depict Colleen's true suffering. They also made Cameron appear nicer in the film. I saw the movie and didn't think it was true to the real story. Colleen, on the other hand, and this is the best part of the story, my dear viewers, is now in her 60s. She managed to recover from her traumatic experience and appeared in several interviews to tell her story. Colleen said that it was her faith in God that kept her going. Inside the coffin, she imagined herself living with her family and spending holidays and Christmas with them. Colleen resumed her studies, got married and gave birth to 2 kids, and she joined an organization that helps women with similar experiences to hers. But I think that no one else has had a similar experience. However, that organization assists women who are victims of violence. Of course, that incident is still fresh in her mind, and she still cries whenever she recalls the details. Finally, Colleen's painful story came to an end. Thank God for a happy ending in which she was not killed, and the criminal was brought to justice. Her case was regarded as one of the most heinous cases in American history. I'd really like to hear your opinions, especially regarding Janice. Despite the fact that we didn't talk much about her, I think she played the main role in the story. We know Cameron is a horrible criminal, and Colleen is a poor victim. But what is Janice's position in this case? Do you see her as a victim or a criminal? We've now reached the end of today's video. If you liked it, don't forget to press like and share this video everywhere if you wish to support me. Thank you very much. The best is yet to come.